in regards to image quality and performance. Like many other games these days, Final Fantasy XVI offers players the choice between a quality mode and a performance mode. Both modes use an aggressive dynamic resolution scaling system, with quality mode typically ranging between 1080p up to 1440p, then spatially upscaled to 4K. Performance mode in comparison seems to top out at 1080p but often drops a lot lower, knocking on the door of 720p from what I can tell. So the first question I want to address then is, does the patch fix performance mode? And the answer to that is no.
Much like, say, Immortals of Avium or Lords of the Fallen, in its 60fps performance mode, it's simply too much to have all of these features and 60fps running in tandem. Once again, with Ark Survival Ascended, we see PS5, Series X and S leaning quite heavily on these low native resolutions, reconstructed as they are, to find the GPU headroom for UE5's best features.
It seems we have gone full circle with people's opinions on what is an acceptable frame rate to play at. 20 years ago, no one cared about frame rate on console side. Console users merely cared about if the game was, actually fun. I realize that the concept of fun is lost for many nowadays, but it does still indeed exist to some extent. However, people nowadays are chasing perfectly realistic visuals and what they experience over the actual feeling of fun. Which makes this video all the more ironic, as the same people who are complaining about frame rates are like the same people who were doing it to themselves. I mean, when you think about it, you're chasing visuals, the most taxing aspect of a video game. Its graphical quality is often the first thing that people point at for a game's poor performance. But I have a question for all these people. Why aren't you chasing something that's more valuable, like its level design, or how it, plays, or the most important aspect, the story? And this is why games like Cuphead and Hollow Knight, which came out the same year in 2017, mind you, are seen as games that have held up compared to, one of the biggest games of that year, Destiny 2, for instance. While these two games are very different in their game design philosophy compared to Destiny 2, visually these two still hold up because they chose style over fidelity. The first aspect of a game to age is its graphical quality. I mean, let's look at Crysis, for example. What was once a visual powerhouse that only the mightiest of machines could run, now runs on something in the palm of your hand. We have computers so small that can run Crysis better than computers of the game's release date. Let time be an example there. However, let's look at other games that came out the same year as Crysis. Persona 3 FES, Super Mario Galaxy, and the original Portal. What do all these games have in common with each other compared to Crysis? Besides being better games in general, they all chose style over fidelity. As we enter chapter 2 of this video of where it all began, this has always been a tricky question to answer. By asking the question of where, usually end up with how and why, which usually ends up spiraling down a rabbit hole as a result. For my best guesses, the trend of frame rate judging started around 2017 funnily. That year has so many ties to gaming and media as a whole. During this year, we got the launch of pretty visually stunning games, Assassin's Creed Origins, Horizon Zero Dawn, and RE7 Biohazard, to name a few. Along with this year came the Xbox One X, the first console to boast quote-unquote true 4K gaming for the masses, something that for years before was merely a thing that reached PC gamers would do to boast about their computer's price. This console would end up as a relatively massive improvement over the Xbox One and One S models, but that would end up being an Achilles heel to gaming to go forward. Considering the PS4 Pro came out roughly a year prior, which claimed to be able to do 4K gaming, but soon found out to do it in a checkerboard rendering style, which in a general essence is basically the predecessor of modern upscalers we have now, like DLSS, FSR, and XeSS. So now that we have the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, the most powerful console on the market, at least at their time. You would think that this would allow game designers to truly make ambitious content-filled titles. But if you're anyone who knows anything, you're wrong. It just led games to being pushed more and more visually to the point that we are now. As we enter the continued downfall of ambitious game titles, as a result of these pro consoles being released from Microsoft and Sony, developers now have more power to work with than ever. But this had unpredictable outcomes. Consumers thought they'd get even better and more ambitious games and experiences, not just glorified tech demos for these new $500 boxes. The most popular and often most graphically intensive games of 2017 often ran at 30 FPS and pursued a 4K visual quality, and thus began the era of graphics over ambition. But that doesn't make any sense. Aren't impressive visuals ambitious? Some would ask, and the answer is complicated. It's yes, but also no. Anyone can make a game that will push a machine to its limits. I could do it right now, but not anyone can make a game that will capture the hearts and minds of everyone. Going back to the Cuphead and Hollow Knight example from earlier, these games never chased visual fidelity. They chose gameplay and art style over visual fidelity, which is why they still look amazing 7 years later. Like, it's why Okami still is good, an 18-year-old game from the PS2 and GameCube era. From 2017 and onward, games started to push the visual limits more and more each year. But as the visual limits were pushed, the frame rates of games got lower and lower across the board. At the start of the PS4 and Xbox One generation, the standard for a game was 1080p 60 FPS or 900p 60 FPS. By the end, it was 1080p 30 or 900p 30 for the base consoles and 1440p 30 for the quote-unquote pro consoles. But where did all that extra power go? Surely they would be able to push 60 FPS on these $500 pro consoles, right? Maybe, but no. People demanded better visuals year over year. And as 4K TVs became cheaper and cheaper to the point of being as much, and eventually even less than a console by the end of the generation, people wanted to play only at 4K and saw nothing less but 4K as a waste. So we ended up getting remakes and remasters of old games to quote-unquote bring them up to modern visual levels. But that begs a question, where are we now? As we reach the present day woes, we're in a timeline where the casuals won. The only ones who want eye candy and nothing else. The ones who have single-handedly funded the numerous remakes of the Resident Evil games, and even the Silent Hill 2 remaster that's coming out soon, and even Last of Us remastered. They'd rather have pretty eye candy over a good game, which is perfectly fine in small doses like any candy is, until you realize the majority of the big releases on the current gen Series X and S, a launch of the PS5, are remakes or remasters. Go look at the top release of the generation. They're basically all remastered or remake games, and even Nintendo is guilty of it. Most of their output in the last 4 years of the console, that being the Nintendo Switch, are just ports, remasters, or remakes. What does that say about the quality of the games now? They're trash. So trash, actually. Live service bullshit that takes up development time that could be going towards a good game. We could have gotten a new Arkham game, but instead we got the worst example of a live service game ever created in Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. And I bet the question of why are we here? Who let the good games at the door? The last time Rocksteady made a good game was Arkham Knight, 9 years ago. Oh, you probably want a more active developing studio. Okay. Respawn Entertainment, the developers of Apex Legends. They made some of the most loved games, Titanfall 1 and 2 along with the recent Jedi games, Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. Jedi Survivor is a bad port on PC, but that's aside, that's a different topic. But one would ask, why is there no Titanfall 3? The most requested game of them. Well, there's a little figure in the room, Apex Legends. One of the most popular esports titles ever made, and one of the most profitable battle royale games on the market. And wouldn't you know it, it's a games as service bullshit. And it is probably the most boring game genre as well, that being Battle Royale. But I'm getting off track. The ones who complain about frame rate are the main topic of this video. In conclusion, the ones who actually care about games have lost the war to those who only want visuals. Instead of big budget developers using that big budget to innovate their gameplay and story, they'd rather push the visual envelope again and again and again and again. They would rather have a showpiece with no soul over a feature-rich product that can keep someone's attention for 10 years. It's why Arkham Knight has 17 times the player base of the recent Suicide Squad game, despite being 9 years, almost 10 years older than it. But regardless of that hilarious blunder from a once respected game developer, where did the soul go? Where did all the emotion and king crafting go? Where did innovation go? Are we truly just vain to choose visuals over style? Well, maybe people are. Nevertheless, I will leave you with this. If we keep going down this road, I've referred that we will be getting more experiences with Hellblade and The Last of Us, and less like Hollow Knight or Cuphead. So with that, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Comment, like, subscribe if you wish. And with that, see you later. Goodbye.